Hi friends, this is Jennifer Belair with Open Hearts Club, and for this week's episode I wanted to dive a little bit into my history / experience with yoga. So last week we talked a little bit about energy, different energy types through the lens or vehicle of human design, but this is slightly related, so that's why I wanted to bring it up as sort of my next topic of conversation. And on the Open Hearts Club blog, there's a post that I wrote called Leaning into Yoga, and that's been my top viewed / liked post. So I just wanted to reflect on that. It felt like a nice calling and a nice space to step into inquiry and conversation around. So just talking about yoga. I'm not by any means an expert. I will forever be a student of life, and I'm just speaking from my own personal experience. I know that the yogic tradition has so much beauty and depth, and it's beyond describable in words, the amount of influence that it has had over countless people and beings on this planet, seen and unseen. So my personal experience with yoga relates back to the beginning when, I guess I should say I've always been a runner, an athlete, so I was always very much in the body, and running is an amazing sport and sort of athletic experience and a human experience, but it also is kind of repetitive. It's very contemplative. And that's where my core background in physical body movement has always been, in running, just kind of this beautiful, beautiful mindful experience. And it was competitive, so there's that. And yoga kept creeping up into my life in different ways, kind of knocking on my spiritual door saying, hey, hello, don't you want to try this out? It's going to be really good for your heart and your soul and everything else. So my first introduction to yoga was when I was in undergrad. I was probably 22, 21, somewhere in that range, and I remember my mom had gotten me an entire yoga kit. There was the mat, the block, the strap, and I was kind of into my collegiate running years, and I was also into partying a lot, drinking copious amounts of different kinds of alcohol, so I didn't really have a space in my mind where I wanted to slow down. And so that was the first time where yoga's like, hey, you might need this, it's good for you. But I used it here and there, mostly for stretching. That's kind of what I knew, was basically you run and then you stretch. And to me, that was some form of yoga. And then after that, I ended up living in Detroit with a really sweet roommate, and she invited me to go to a yoga class with her at Detroit Yoga Lab. And I was excited, I was nervous, I loved being in the big city. It was so different than anywhere else I had ever lived, and so I went with her, and it was like a 1 week pass, 7 days for a very affordable amount. And so I took the class, and I think it was like a slow flow or something like that, but the studio was beautiful and I did the yoga, I loved it. I really loved being in my body, and I was so relaxed that I fell asleep. And I always think about that day because I'm like, wow, my poor self really needed some rest. She was drinking lots of alcohol, lots of coffee, and probably alcohol too, just in a different rhythm, like this very artist person living in Detroit, a grad student, not really taking time to be in the body except for running occasionally. At this point, I was in graduate school at Wayne State. And so I went to this yoga class, and I was like, wow, what happened there? And then, it was great. And then I sort of forgot about it. And then my third big yoga experience was actually at Electric Forest in Michigan. And I did a group yoga session with my husband and then countless others. It was actually a smaller turnout, but there was probably 50, 60 people out there. And at this point, I was doing yoga at home, doing yoga with Adrienne, and just really loved the online presence, the joy and the warm-heartedness that she cultivates in her YouTube channel. And so this third yoga knocking at my door was at Electric Forest at a festival. And it was very liberating, very beautiful, being in community, practicing yoga, having this sense of togetherness. I found really profoundly touching. And so those were kind of like the 3 times that yoga had knocked at my door. And the third time, I think, is when it really started to wake me up, where I was like, ooh, wow, I felt so much healing in this like 30, 40-minute session, and I really want to keep doing this. And so another funny story is this was before the Electric Forest yoga experience. I actually had an interview at Detroit Yoga Lab, and I remember meeting the woman who owned the studio, Naomi, and going in for an interview, and she was just so gentle. Her presence was so kind, and she left a really big impact on me. And I'm saying this because it's going to lead up to the next thing, but there was something about the energy that she created and that she carried within herself that I always hung on to that. And so fast forward, after all those experiences, COVID, and I was doing a lot of yoga online at this point in my life, and I noticed how good it made me feel, how joyful it made me feel, and it felt both about the mind, the body, the breathing, and I just really loved it. I knew that it was some beautiful ancient tool that made me feel wonderful, whether or not I could get into a pose, whether or not I could do XYZ. For me, it was about the feeling that it brought. So I was just filled with so much love and so much joy for yoga, especially as someone who has some more worrisome tendencies in my constitution and how I feel from day to day. I found that yoga / being in my body really helped to settle the energy, to kind of pinpoint the places where it's stuck and allow it to open up. So I think there's just a lot to say about that, but essentially what happened was I decided to get my yoga teacher training certificate through Detroit Yoga Lab, and it was one of the best decisions of my life, and it's still rippling down, trickling down, and affecting me daily. It was a really beautiful experience where we went into the philosophy of yoga, the asanas, so the movement, the body practice, and just learning that in traditional yoga, actually the poses are meant to prepare our bodies so we can sit for long periods of time in meditation. So it's not like this westernized idea of, wow, look at me, I'm in this beautiful pose. It's more or less like we prepare the body so we can water the soil of the mind and take care of the mind as well. So again, like I said, there's such a rich history and depth, and I'm only speaking from what I know in this current state of being. So yeah, it was a really, really beautiful experience, one of the most life-changing experiences, and I did it during COVID, so when a lot of things were sort of locked down and slow and not a lot was happening, so it felt very healing to have a community, to have a space to connect with others, and to kind of bring the relationship with yoga full circle for myself. So going from that state in my life where I was struggling, I was not taking care of my body. There is a hummingbird in the distance. I'm sorry, easily distracted. So I can't even speak because I love hummingbirds so much. So yeah, coming full circle, just knowing that this practice, this ability to show up for our bodies daily, as often as possible, as consistently as possible, is really important. And so for me, that was one step in how I can manipulate and shift my energy. So for me, movement is kind of a number one foundation in my life. And if I don't do it, I know. Like, I'm very aware when I did not show up for myself, when I did not do some kind of movement in the body. And I try to make it a gentle approach. Sometimes I'll get more competitive with myself, but more or less I do look to yoga as a very spiritual practice. It's taught me a lot just about, again, coming back to energy, coming back to the body, coming back to this idea of expansiveness, and just like trusting in the range of motion that your body is like able to carry in any given pose, and just knowing that you are impacting your own energetic field when you move the body, when you breathe in the body. And I remember Naomi said that something along the lines of yoga without breathing is just stretching. So the breath is very important. And if you're into wellness spaces and circles, or you're ever Googling how to combat depression, chances are you'll come up with things like deep belly breathing and breath of fire and this, that, and the other thing. So it's a tool, and it's another tool that we can add into our wellness toolbox, and it doesn't have to be a competitive thing. If you're able to make it into a studio, that's incredible, that's wonderful, it's a beautiful space. But if not, there's many free resources online and on YouTube. And like I said, Yoga with Adriene was and still is one of my favorite ways to practice yoga. I think she's very approachable. She describes things really well, and yoga can be so many different things. It can be a full-blown session of like 1 hour of very intense vinyasa yoga, or it can be a simple nighttime routine of stretching, something like cat-cow, or Baddha Konasana, like a bound angle pose, just things to move the body in space and to feel your body and to notice how you feel. But I think for me, yoga is about moving energy around, especially if I'm in kind of a stuck place. If I know I'm feeling down or I'm feeling sort of plagued by the negative thinking patterns, I know I can always come back to yoga, the physical practice and the mental practice, and I can find this very beautiful space of serenity and this space of cultivating self-love, because I just view us as humans as like these energy spheres. And so it's like, if we're extending ourselves in so many directions and we're absorbing so much information, we really need to pull that back inward and honor our inner energy and just feel what it feels like to have like these incredible beautiful bodies on this planet. And for me, yoga has really helped me with my posture. It's helped me with my confidence. It's helped me with just understanding the limitations of my own physical body. And for me, it's just helped me sit on the ground for longer periods of time. Like when I meditate, sometimes I'll do up to 30 minutes or more, and I don't have any issues with slumping my back or what have you. And if you do, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just more or less my own recognizing in my body how things have shifted and changed. And I just think that's really cool, just to notice your own advancement. If you are someone who's more competitive, just seeing how your body moves in space over time. So I can look back to the Jennifer from a year ago and be like, wow, I have so much better like hip mobility, or now that I'm doing these deep belly breaths, I feel more calm. A really beautiful thing about yoga is it's kind of like a science or a technology. So when we're breathing into our bodies, we're affecting our central nervous system. And so if you don't know, the central nervous system is part of the spinal column, and it actually has like a sister nervous system to it. Like you've probably heard the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. And so one of them is responsible for the fight or flight. So it's this kind of stress feeling like, and it relates back to our ancient selves of like, there's a tiger, we gotta run, getting out of here. In modern day, it's bills that have to be paid, it's things that didn't go right, someone cuts you off, you're nervous about something. You can kind of elevate this particular nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system, through your worrying, through your anxiety, and it can be on constant, it can be frayed out, it can be kind of stressed out. And so we have to cultivate practices that activate the parasympathetic nervous system. And so there's probably a million ways that we can do this, but I know that yoga is one of them. I know hugging is really great. Meditation, mindfulness, being creative, deep belly breaths. So just like closing your eyes, allowing all the dust to settle, and just breathing in through the nose and letting it all out through the mouth. And even if you do a couple rounds of this, it's really helpful. And you'll notice that as you breathe, your breath kind of goes to a certain space. Sometimes we get stuck in the chest area, and as we continue to breathe deeper, we'll notice that the breath can kind of flow more smoothly. So the idea of yoga is like, we have this energy, this life force, this ability to affect our central nervous system through movement, through the full range of motion of the body. Like if you think of cat-cow, the spine is kind of going in a downward C shape, and then it's opening up. So we're kind of expressing ourselves through that full range of motion, which is really important for our bodies to stay nimble, to stay happy, and again, just to keep that energy moving. Because if we find ourselves sitting a lot, especially in front of computers, right, we get like the hunch down thing and if we're like not moving, we're creating very stagnant energy. So with yoga, with stretching, with mobility work, with walking, with running, rollerblading, like whatever it is you like to do to move, you are in effect moving the energy around. So we can't always see everything that's out there, right? We have this term called energy. There's scientific calculations that have shown like, oh, there's like an energetic field to living things and maybe to non-living things. Like I said, not a scientist, I'm just speaking from the information that I've gathered in my life. But you can feel it. It's kind of like that similar idea I talked about last week with human design. Some people bring a very big, joyful energy. Some people are harboring anger, resentment, neglect, and it might just be the stories in their minds. So that's why it's really important to know what our energy is like and know who we are when we kind of cultivate those very pure moments of ourselves. And so for me, it comes back to dedicating time and energy of my own to the morning practice. And so for me, the morning practice relates to, okay, I have to be in my body, I have to calm the mind, I should definitely write, I should probably read something spiritual, uplifting, whatever it is, and I should move. So that's kind of like the foundation, the core. And if I don't do those things, I can feel this kind of friction of energy in the body, and it doesn't feel good. So it's like, if we get to choose, this is one of my favorite quotes, if we get to choose what we do in a day, like we are what we do in a day. So if we get to choose some of those things, sometimes we don't get to choose everything, right? Some of us have kids, we have jobs, we have commitments to life. It's all about saying yes to your yeses. So if there's things that really light you up and that really are your foundations for being an awesome, happy human, those are the things you should definitely do. And as I'm saying this out loud, I'm learning from myself and kind of etching it into my own heart fabric, saying, yes, please keep doing these things. Because when we don't, we're not able to show up as our best, most authentic selves. So just cultivating some kind of practice that really lifts and shifts you into this best version of yourself, because it's like that old adage goes, you can't fill the cup of anyone else in the world unless you start with your own. And so filling that cup up, ideally first thing in the morning, is really going to help. Just want to see how many minutes I'm going here. So that's kind of my little brief take on some reactions to yoga. I don't do it every day. I really want to. I'm striving to, and actually this week I'm doing it every day just to kind of feel back into that, because sometimes we're on a nice upswing and sometimes we forget, we do other things. So for me, it's coming back to that space, both doing a practice and then having like a nighttime routine is really important to me, just to wind down, again, calming that central nervous system. So that's kind of what I wanted to express, is at the Open Hearts Club, as I'm going to achieve my yoga teacher training certificate, I'm excited to share more opportunities to express things about yoga, to share some simple practices, because in essence what I want to do is make wellness available to as many people as possible, because I feel like there's definitely like a wall where if you don't make enough money or you don't have enough time, then you're not able to access these really important tools. And so that's kind of where I want to operate from, this very helpful, genuine space of just sharing light. I shared in my blog post that one of my earliest memories of kind of being more aware was reading a label from a favorite band called Bright Eyes, and the CD had an inscription and it said, "I want to be warm light that spreads." And I remember that quote, and I always think about it because it just struck me in such a way. I was like 17. I didn't know what to do with that at the time, but now I feel like that's my soul's mission on this planet, is just to spread as much joy as I can, to work on myself so I can show up better, create opportunities that are sliding scale so more people can enjoy these beautiful gifts of wellness. And so be on the lookout for some fun and easy practices related to yoga, breathing, wellness in general. And I just want to say I appreciate you so much. Thank you for listening and sharing, and I'll be curious if you have any comments on your path to yoga or how movement has served you. I'm wishing you a beautiful, joy-filled, and love-filled day today. I hope you get some sunshine. I hope you move. I hope you see a sunset. I hope you do all those wonderful, incredible things that we get to do in our bodies. And I hope you get a chance to move, be in your body, and do some incredible breathing practices and yogic practices. It's really such a special treat. So thank you so much again for watching, and I will see you next week. Thank you so much. Oh.